There we go. Okay, next up. Again, had the pleasure of meeting Cindy about 5 years ago. We have worked side by side on a lot of things, and one thing Cindy learned the hard way is never leave a meeting early, otherwise you get volunteered for something. Anyway, Cindy, I'm proud to introduce you as a state representative for the 79th District candidate, Cindy Duran.
That's not how I ended up doing this by walking out of something early, I want you to know.
No, you didn't volunteer.
No, I didn't volunteer for this. This came about through a great deal of prayer and consideration from myself, my family, a lot of people. So I'll just basically give you a brief history of myself and then get into kind of the nitty-gritty of stuff. I'm a lifelong resident of Barron County. I was raised in God's country, Spinks Corners. Grew up working on a farm before I went to school in the morning, when I came home in the afternoon, and on the evenings and the weekends. That's what I did. I graduated from Benton Harbor High School, married my high school sweetheart, Steve, who's over here. He's my jack of all trades right now. We just celebrated 42 years of marriage just a couple weeks ago. We have three daughters and 3 son-in-laws and 8 beautiful grandchildren who are also great volunteers for me right now. I'm also a registered nurse. I'm a licensed registered nurse in the state of Michigan. I actually worked in the Michigan Medicaid program for 15 years. So I had an idea of how the program functions. I saw what I call the unintended consequences of Medicaid. So when an idea came to expand it, I could not fathom doing that. The unintended consequences I saw were, it's easy to say we're controlling it now, but then another entity takes it over at some point in the future, and whatever you said back here doesn't count anymore because another group is now running it, and you have lost control over it. I always said I could tell you stories that would make the blood shoot straight out of your eyeballs. I'm not going to go into that now, but what I saw was a program that was managed poorly by the state. The bureaucrats in charge of it always had different ideas of how it should be run. So in essence, it wasted taxpayer money. I always said if the taxpayers saw the dollars that went into Medicaid, they would revolt. Now, I have read estimates that up to 800,000 people could end up on the Medicaid rolls. There's not that many on there now. And then what happens when we have that many people on the rolls and we don't have doctors to cover those people? I had a doctor at Lakeland just tell me a couple weeks ago that he gets 7 cents on every dollar for a reimbursement from Medicaid. So how long is a doctor going to stay in business making 7 cents a dollar treating Medicaid patients? There's a lot of studies done that the health care of Medicaid patients is poor. So we're not only looking at the cost, we're looking at the quality of health care by the people receiving Medicaid. You find very few specialists taking Medicaid. Why? Because they don't get reimbursed. The South Haven Hospital closed their maternity unit down. The reason in the paper was Medicaid expansion. So those are some of the unintended consequences of Medicaid. We just saw where the budget went up by 6%. The state budget, the reason given in the paper, Medicaid expansion. Now, we can trust the federal government to keep their word to reimburse the state. And hey, folks, it doesn't matter. It's still your money. Coming out of the federal government, it's still your money. So I respectfully disagree with the idea that Medicaid expansion is going to be good for the state. You look at states like Texas who have resisted this. They're the states that are growing now. The other big issue is Common Core. That's another issue where we are losing our state sovereignty, just like Medicaid expansion. The federal government can say jump and the state has to say how high. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Medicaid expansion, with Common Core. We're seeing now the curriculum coming through on Common Core. They're changing the U.S. history. There's just a whole bunch of things wrong with that program. And we have talked about that here many times. And I'm not going to go into any more of that right now. But just some other differences between myself and Al. Increased hunting and fishing fees. Increases like that to me are taxes. Increase in taxes. I would not have voted for that. I believe we need to reform no-fault car insurance. Increase in off-the-road vehicle licenses. I would not have voted for that. The bailout for Detroit. I would not have voted for that. Mandatory license plate replacement after 10 years. I would not have voted for that. It's just another way to sock it to the Michigan taxpayers. There's other programs that I have mentioned before, and I will just talk about those briefly. The Certificate of Need program in the state of Michigan needs to be reformed. Instead of reforming it, what did the state legislature do? They voted to increase the fees and increase the bureaucracy of that program. Reform of that program alone would encourage job growth in the state of Michigan. That's why we can't compete with Indiana, because they do not have a Certificate of Need program and we do. Then we have the Michigan Economic Development Corporation that takes taxpayer money and picks winners and losers. Those are some of the differences. And I say it boils down to 8 words. Limited government versus larger government, lower taxes versus increased taxes. I'll just tell you a few stories from the campaign trail. Now, I haven't heard about roads, but I have heard about loss of jobs. I have talked to retirees. When I started my door-to-door campaigning, people were just coming back from Florida, and this is what they told me. I'm changing my residency. I can no longer afford to license my car in the state of Michigan, and I feel like I am being taxed unfairly because I'm a senior. So I ran into quite a few of those people. Just yesterday, I ran into somebody who was putting their house up for sale because they have a lost job. They can't afford to live in the state any longer. Also knocked at somebody's door who told me, and this goes back to the job created story, her husband just retired. He decided to be a consultant. He has a part-time client. He doesn't make any money yet, but the state congratulated him for creating 8 jobs. So I question some of those job creation numbers when I hear stories like that. So, no, I don't have the experience. I've not served in the legislature before. I have to say my experience has been in serving on church committees, all the way from Sunday school to advisory committee to youth ministry. You name it, I did it. Does that prepare somebody to serve in state government? I think it does. My desire is to serve the district with a servant's heart, never forgetting that I work for you. I would just leave you with a quote that has been kind of my guiding guidance through the campaign, and it's by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it says, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to act is to act, and not to speak is to speak." So I decided to act, and I decided to speak. So I would appreciate your vote on August 5th. Thank you very much.